Hey, Shalom, it's Izzy here with Holy Language Institute at holylanguage.com. I just finished filming our newest Hebrew verses lesson, reading through Genesis chapter 46. It's really great. It's the story of Jacob coming down to Egypt and being reunited with Joseph. Really, really happy story. And I do have my Hebrew Letters coffee cup here, and I even have some coconut oil in my coffee today. It's really yummy. Just wanted to point that out to make you jealous. Now, there was one thing in this lesson I wanted to share with you in this little takeaway. The verb behind the Hebrew word Torah is used in this story, and it really helps us to understand what the Torah is all about. Because Torah is often mistranslated as law, but it doesn't really mean law. Like sometimes it can have that sense, but that's not the primary meaning. So I wanted to show that to you. So here's the Hebrew text of Genesis chapter 46. If you've never seen Hebrew before, check it out. I think it's a very beautiful language. This is the language of the Bible that Jesus read. Jesus grew up going to synagogue on Saturdays, and hearing the scrolls read publicly, and of course he also at the right age he started going up and reading from the scrolls himself, and this was the stuff that he read. So one of the biggest reasons I love teaching Hebrew is because it can help us to come closer to Yeshua of Nazareth. It can help us to understand him better as we get closer to his Bible and understand his Bible better. It's like following in his footsteps, like literally, like these very Hebrew words, like his eyes read these so many times and his mouth read them out loud. And that's very special and meaningful to me. This is a great chapter. Like, there are a whole bunch of Hebrew names. We talked about some of these Hebrew names and their meanings, and a couple of them that you definitely wouldn't want to name your kid. And we talked about some other things. I'm not going to get into all of that stuff. Hopefully you'll join us for the full lesson on the Hebrew verses page at holylanguage.com. But I do want to show you this one phrase, and we'll unpack it together. So it lists like all the names of Jacob and his family who went down to Egypt, and then in verse 28 it says Va'et Yehuda. So, and Judah, in Hebrew you say Yehuda, Shalach, so he sent. And this is a really interesting word too, actually, because this word Shalach, like, it means to send, but it's also like it's the verb from which we get the Hebrew word for an apostle. An apostle in Hebrew is a shaliach, somebody who has been shalacht, sent. It's like someone sent on a mission, someone sent with a message, someone that you send as your legal agent or your representative or your deputy, you could even say. Sometimes it's translated like that in Jewish writings. Like, that's the idea. So Judah was like Jacob's apostle, so to speak, and he sent him lefanav, before him, El to Yosef, to Joseph. And here's the word I really want to focus on with you, lehorot. Okay, so the verb there is yara. So he sent him to yara lefanav, in front of him, Goshna, so to Goshen. So that's our Hebrew sentence. Hopefully I didn't lose you there. Hopefully they didn't feel overwhelmed. Don't worry, we're not going to read any more Hebrew, so stay with me here, all right? Now, the one Hebrew word I want to look at with you is this verb here, right here, yara. Let's look at how it's translated in some different versions. So here I have Esword, and we have Genesis chapter 46, verse 28. In English, it reads, "Now he sent Judah before him to Joseph to what? To point out the way before him to Goshen." Now, the verb there, like I said, is yara. What's interesting about that verb is from that verb yara, we get the Hebrew word Torah. That's the noun. So the verb is yara, to point out the way, and then the noun is Torah. Now, Torah is usually translated as law in Christian Bibles, but that's actually something of a mistranslation. It's a mistranslation because we have another Hebrew word for law. Like, the Hebrew word for law is chok, and then the plural is chukim. And it comes from the verb chakak, which means to write something indelibly, like to inscribe it, for instance. That's a law. And that's the Hebrew word for law. And like, for instance, Psalm 119, it's like this big poetic expression of love to God, expressed as love for his law and his commandments and whatnot. So, like, you'll see that word, the word for law, used lots, for instance, in Psalm 119. So that's the word for law. So then we have this Hebrew word Torah. What does Torah mean? Well, it's translated as law, but a better translation is teaching or instruction. Because it comes from this verb yara, to what? To point out the way. So if you want to show someone the direction they should go in, if you want to, point out the way to them, show them the goal, so to speak, then you yara them. So, this word can have the sense of pointing out the way. It's also the verb to teach. So, when you're teaching somebody, when you're giving them instructions, you're pointing out the way to them. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a better understanding of the law of Moses. If you read like the first 5 books of the Bible, the law of Moses for the first time, I mean, some of it is stories, and they're great stories. Then some of them are kind of scary too, because they're stories about really messed up people, and which is actually really comforting. Just that there's so many stories in the Bible about really messed up people. The Bible is definitely not about perfect people. But there's also all these laws, and some of them seem, archaic, or some of them might even seem a little bit barbaric. You read some of these and you're like, how is this different than Sharia law? If you're new to the Bible and you're reading it for the first time, you might have those questions. So hopefully this just gives you a bit of a better sense of the big picture. Aside from, some of those specific laws that can be hard to understand, hopefully you can just get this sense that, the Bible in general, and then the first 5 books of the Bible, the big idea there is like God pointing out the way for you, giving you some direction, giving you some practical instructions for your life and your relationship with Him, and just teaching you the way, parents teach their children. That's what the Torah is all about. It's not just about laying down the law. It's not about legalism and heavy stuff like that. It's like a loving parent showing a child the way to go and pointing out that way. So that was what I had for you here. One thing I'll just mention on the side. I really unpacked this in the actual lesson, so I'm not going to get into that here. But there's this one guy who was the son of Simon. I mentioned this. I just want to point it out to you. All these names here. All right. So it mentions here in Genesis 46:10 the sons of Simeon, who is Simon, Shimon. One of them is Shaul. Now here, that's how the name is actually written in Hebrew and pronounced Shaul. This is the name of the first king of Israel. There, it's written and pronounced Saul for some reason. I guess just because of tradition, but it's the same name. And then this also, was the name of one of Yeshua's apostles. So, his Hebrew name was Shaul, or Saul. He's sometimes referred to as Saul of Tarsus. And then his Roman name was Paul, or, literally it was more like Polos. Now, there's this urban legend in the Christian world that his name was Saul, and then it was changed to Paul because he became a believer in Yeshua, and that somehow made him a Gentile. So then he had to have a Gentile name. And that's just not true. I would encourage you to go back and actually read the book of Acts. He's actually called Saul for several chapters after he became a disciple of Yeshua. And then finally in Acts chapter 3, his Damascus Road experience was in Acts chapter 9. And then it wasn't until Acts chapter 13 that it says Saul, who is also known as Paul. So basically that's the way things were back in the ancient times and still today when for Jewish people. You have a Hebrew name, and then you also have a name in the Gentile culture that you belong to. So for him it was a Roman name. Nowadays it would be an English name. So anyways, that's I'm not going to go into any more detail with that, but I did want to point it out to you as a just a little peek at the lesson. So that's what I have for you today. That's the takeaway from our Hebrew verses lesson. Hopefully that helps you to understand the Bible in general better. Hopefully that helps you to understand the Torah and what it's all about a little bit better. And hopefully that just encourages you to brush the dust off the Old Testament for yourself and spend more time reading the Bible that Jesus read. And I would love to have you join us at holylanguage.com. I like to call us, as a community all around the world, I like to call us a tribe. We're like a global tribe with a focus on following Yeshua together in a Hebrew way. Reading the Bible that he read, learning some Hebrew, using that as a way to come closer to him, to grow in our discipleship to him. We have tons of lessons on the website and new lessons every week. For instance, our Hebrew verses lesson, of which this is a takeaway. So come check us out at holylanguage.com. I would love to have you join our community. I'd love to have you studying with me in a more serious way on a regular basis. And thanks again for joining me in this little Hebrew verses takeaway.